HyperLiquid is dominating the decentralized perps market with over 70% of on-chain perps volume. And the craziest part is HyperLiquid's built a $40 billion protocol without any VC money, without paying influencers, without any paid spend. This is a three-part series. In this first video, I give you an overview of their growth, and in the second and third videos, I dive in deeper into their referral and point strategy, as well as their ecosystem strategy. So let's get right into it. So what is HyperLiquid? HyperLiquid is both a perps exchange as well as a layer 1 blockchain for DeFi. HyperLiquid was founded by Jeff Yan and another co-founder. They both were ex-Citadel. They both had high frequency trading backgrounds. So they started building this right after the FTX collapse, and their vision was to deliver centralized exchange-like performance, speed, and low fees, but on-chain in a decentralized manner, so what happened with FTX wouldn't happen again. They bootstrapped this with zero venture funding, which also allowed them to give their community massive ownership and a huge initial airdrop. One thing to understand is when they were building HyperLiquid, they looked around the entire ecosystem and couldn't find a chain that really fit their requirements. And so they decided to build their own L1 to essentially make sure they got the trading performance that they wanted. So those are two key lessons from this early chapter. Now, late 2023 is where they started going public. With their initial alpha testers, they did give them basically a points drop. So early testers were rewarded very well. However, by late 2023, they launched HyperCore, basically made it public. You could go out and trade, and public members could basically participate. This is when they started their airdrop program. They launched season 1. This would be 1 million points every single week. And this led to a lot of trading volume, as one of the big ways to earn points was to just trade a lot. There was also an early referral program. You can earn points by referring people and basically get a percentage of the number of points that they earn. And this led to obviously a lot more virality as people realized that they would essentially get a share of other people's points, right? And everybody knew this was kind of a potential airdrop opportunity. So by December 2023, tens of thousands of people are actively using the protocol. Obviously, a lot of people are farming it, but this was surpassing rivals like Vortex and Gains. So by 2024, this traction started turning into fire, right? One of the things they did is they upgraded the referral program. So new users could get discounts if they used a referral code, and this would apply up to $25 million volume. So there was a 4% fee discount, which obviously makes a difference. And referrers would also make 10% of taker fees up to 1 billion in referred volume. So obviously this led a lot more people to talk about it. But the real big key here was the product was really good, right? Like they didn't launch a points program with a mediocre half-baked product. They had their closed alpha group where they're really talking to the testers, spending a lot of time on them. And once that showed that, okay, people are actually using this because they like using it, that's when they started rolling this out publicly and really going hard on the incentives, right? Now, by April 2024, you were seeing days with over $1 billion in volume. You were seeing 30 to 40% of all on-chain perps activity happening on HyperLiquid. At this point, you had over 100,000 users, and you also saw market makers join in. Now, this also helped a lot because liquidity got a lot deeper, and essentially it just made for a better trading experience. Now, this leads to the big bang. So by fall of 2024, HyperLiquid was absolutely crushing it. And then they launched their token on November 29th. So they did 31% of their total supply airdrop to their community. 310 million tokens dropped to 94,000 users. One of the largest airdrops ever. Now, 31% of their supply at this point is worth something like $14 billion. So initially the price was more around $1.5 or $1.8, and it quickly ran to $6 and then $18. But you had this crazy wealth effect, right? Like every HyperLiquid trader who really took part made a lot of money. And the weird thing was, instead of the token dumping, which it often does after many airdrops, you just had the token rally like crazy. Now, why is that? The first is because of how great the product is, people actually believed that there was even more potential for the token to continue doing well. So a lot of people decided to keep their tokens because they just knew that, okay, there's a lot more opportunity in the ecosystem. The massive size and euphoria from this airdrop also drew the rest of crypto Twitter in, who also felt a lot of FOMO, and people decided to come in and essentially take part in the HyperLiquid ecosystem. So that drew a lot of price action as well, because everybody who missed out felt massive FOMO. Now, the third really big reason why token price kept going up is they had a buyback model as well as a burn model. So the buybacks create some massive pressure because the HyperLiquid Assistance Fund is an absolutely huge part of why HyperLiquid's done so well. I think at this point, they bought back over $1 billion worth of hype, which is absolutely insane. So at this point, after TGE, volumes were at $2 to $3 billion a day. TVL kept growing as people started staking HyperLiquid for further rewards. So a big lesson here is that being generous with the community actually works if you have a great product. A lot of protocols really mess this up where they are very stingy with their early users, and then their token just dumps because people lose faith in them and people don't want to stick around. Now, the second reason your token dumps after airdrops is because your product sucks and people just were farming it, right? HyperLiquid, I think people saw that this is going to keep growing. They felt like this was early Solana days. They felt that this was going to go bigger and bigger. And when you create euphoria in your community, you get that effect. Now, after the launch, by January to February, you started seeing HyperLiquid start approaching 70% of all on-chain perps. It flipped Ethereum in protocol revenue at a certain point, which is absolutely mind-blowing. You started seeing Trump and Melania get listed, so that led to even increased volume. At a certain point, it reached $22 billion in daily volume. So people were really just trading perps on-chain with these meme coins on HyperLiquid. So you started seeing a lot more markets also open up. Now, by Q2, Hyper EVM, which is their layer one, also started making a big move, right? You started seeing more of an ecosystem around HyperLiquid, and you started seeing more of a focus from Jeff on the ecosystem versus just the application itself. So you started seeing DEXs, lending protocols, stable coins, all kinds of stuff happening on Hyper EVM. And people started guessing that A, these new protocols would also launch token airdrops, so they started farming these. And B, HyperLiquid also has a ton of community tokens still left in the tank, and they likely are going to do another airdrop at a certain point. So people have been farming because they're expecting another big HyperLiquid airdrop in the future, as well as airdrops from these protocols. By July of 2025, there's around $320 billion in monthly volume, $15 billion in open interest, and 10% of Binance futures volume. So it's starting to make a dent in Binance's business. So if you actually look at this chart here, you can see that the blue is TVL, and TVL's just kept rolling. Stable coins also have become a thing where there's many more stable coins that you can basically lend or trade with on HyperLiquid and Hype EVM. And then Perps volume has just kept rolling. You can see it's just kept growing and growing, right? Currently, as of August of 2025, it's still number one in on-chain Perps. There's $2 billion in TVL. The token itself almost reached $50. It's around $40 right now, which is around $40 billion in fully diluted value. What you're also seeing right now is a lot of people farming airdrops on Hyper EVM, which also is leading to more and more TVL. So what are the big lessons you can take away at a high level here? So the first lesson here is that a relentless focus on product is incredibly important. And it's important to get product market fit with a smaller group of users before launching a public points program or before launching incentives. This will lead you to have more real signal, and you'll also get a lot more feedback from people that are using the product daily, right? So start with a smaller kind of closed group for actually getting a lot of signal as to how your product is doing. Now, the second lesson here is if you're building a truly innovative product and the current technology out there doesn't really help get you there and it doesn't really support what you're trying to do, it might make sense to own the tech stack. Obviously, this can be a lot of work, but in some cases, it can make a lot of sense. The third lesson here is because Jeff and his co-founders seem to already have a decent amount of money, they were able to skip the VCs and venture funding and go straight into building for the community and essentially giving the community a huge stake in this. And this just led to HyperLiquid just getting a crazy amount of growth from the community, right? And this is something that you can't really replicate unless you are either willing to skip venture funding or reduce your own team stake in how much you make, right? And honestly, that's not a bad idea, right? Like, you don't really need the team to have 25% of the protocol. If you lower that to 15 and you give an extra 10% out to the community, that's gonna probably make your stake worth more. Now, the second piece about not raising any funding is they didn't have to go and spend months fundraising. One thing I've noticed is a lot of founders spend maybe like 1/3 of their time fundraising. So they'll fundraise for their seed round and then go and do the Series A. And it's a huge distraction, right? I have seen multiple teams just go into fundraising mode. And if it's necessary, it's necessary. But I do think there's something to be said about bootstrapping and being lean and building that way. Another big lesson here is well-designed incentives. So having a great points and referral program can supercharge growth once you do have a solid product. You don't want to introduce those too early because it can essentially lead to a false signal. The last lesson here is tokenomics really aligned with the holders. Unlike Uniswap, for example, which has Uniswap Labs as the equity entity that takes a huge chunk of value from the ecosystem, with HyperLiquid, it really is community first. And that just leads to the community raving about them. So that's something to keep in mind. When you're generous with people, they're generous back with you, right? Like HyperLiquid doesn't need to pay KOLs because all of them got pretty rich off the actual airdrop itself. And they also like the fact that it's not like every other protocol out there. Now, in the next video, we're going to dive deeper into the points and referral mechanics of HyperLiquid. Make sure to subscribe so you can see the next video when it's out.